Hi guys, this episode is going to be about why I don't believe in built-in habits. A reader emailed me recently. He said that he found a few simple yet non-obvious thoughts on my blog, and one of them was that I don't believe in built-in habits. And at that point, I realized something, that I've mentioned this idea a few times on the blog, in my newsletter, on this podcast, but I never actually dedicated an entire episode to this idea. So here it is. Before I go further, I want to be clear about one thing. I am not saying that I don't believe in consistency. I certainly do. Consistency is what makes everything else possible. And I think consistency is the main recipe for success. But what I don't believe in is the traditional advice on how to get to the level of consistency that is required. If you're even remotely interested in improving your life, you already know the formula. You've read about it in all the books, you've listened to all the smart people talking about it. Basically, it's the trigger, behavior, reward system. So you have a trigger, it causes you to behave in a certain way, and then you get some sort of reward. And the way to change your habits is kind of like tweak the behavior, and then you get a different reward. And we've all read the Atomic Habits, the book, and we get the idea. And the other common advice is that you need to stick with something for 21 days. You need to print out this calendar where you check things off. And apparently after 21 days, something becomes automatic and then off you go. Some say it's 28 days. I recently heard that it takes 3 months. Whatever the number, the promise is the same. Stick with it long enough and the behavior becomes automatic. It sounds clean, it sounds simple, it even sounds scientific, so we all think that it must be true. But in reality, I have yet to meet a single person who actually achieved consistency this way. Think about it for a second. Have you ever met someone who lost a serious amount of weight, learned a new language, built a business, or transformed their career by following the 21-day calendar with check marks on the wall? I mean, when was the last time you've met someone who transformed their life in some significant way, and when you asked about hey, how did you do it, and then they told you, oh, it's just the calendar, the check marks, the traditional way of building habits. It's easy. Just print out the calendar and check things off for 21 days. Never happened to me, and I bet it never happened to you. I haven't met a single person, not one. They simply do not exist in my world, and I've been paying attention. What I do know is a lot of people, myself included, who tried it. You've probably tried it too. The check marks, the willpower, all of that. Day 1, motivated. Day 2, still going. By day 3, the calendar is forgotten and the check marks stop. Then you rip off the calendar off your wall and kind of try to do a new thing, a new method for building habits. And here's where the logic of it falls apart for me. If this method actually worked, any person who did it once should become unstoppable. Think about it. They would build the first habit in 21 days. Then they move to the next, then the next. Within a year, they'd have a perfect daily routine, fluent Spanish, a 6-pack, a thriving side business, or even it would be so thriving it would become their main business. They would have a fantastic meditation practice or religious practice. They'd be a superhuman. Will probably all know their name. They would go on opera and talk about it. I don't know that person, and neither do you. So the logic doesn't really, like this scientific method of 21 days, trigger behavior, reward, it just doesn't hold in real life. This begs the question, if the traditional habit building advice doesn't work, does it mean people are doomed to stay the same? Does it mean that people can never change, can never improve, can never change their habits? And the answer is no. Again, forget the philosophical or the theoretical frameworks. Look in real life, look at people around you. That's not what we see in real life. People obviously do change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but we do have plenty of examples when people change their behavior. We probably know a bunch of people who have changed something in their life, achieved some sort of consistency in some area of their lives, and saw really good results. Someone quit smoking after 20 years, someone started running and never stopped, someone walked away from drinking or sugar or processed food and didn't go back. So we have plenty of examples of people around us achieving incredible results, and the underlying reason why is through some daily, consistent, new or different action. So if it isn't the 21-day calendar that gets them there, or the trigger behavior reward thing, what is it? And that's the question that I've asked myself a few years ago, and I've been thinking about it and brainstorming and just paying attention to what people say when they're asked about their transformation. And I started going through every example I could think of, every person I knew who had genuinely changed something. I've analyzed my own successful behavior changes of the past, and there have been a few of them. And here's what I have so far. I think I found the same pattern that showed up over and over again. And for now, I have a working title for this. I call it the click method. Something clicks in people's head, and after that, the old behavior becomes impossible to continue. For some people, it's a medical diagnosis. They walk out of the hospital with a piece of paper in their hand and they never touch a cigarette again. Or they quit sugar, or they cut out processed food, or they quit a job that has been stressing them out. Done. The moment they hear the diagnosis, maybe 5-10 minutes to process it, okay, an hour tops, and then that's it. Like from that point forward, they have a new behavior. They didn't have to read a self-help book on how to do that. They didn't have to print out the 21-day calendar and the checklist. They didn't have to go to therapy or any of that. It's just the behavior change happens automatically when something clicks. And I think a hospital, if you think about it, is kind of like the most effective coach out there, because in terms of efficacy, there is no coach, no program, no self-help book that would be as effective as what happens inside a hospital with medical diagnosis or people experiencing some dramatic events. It's unmatched, the level of transformation that happens out there. The change oftentimes takes just a few minutes after hearing and processing a diagnosis or some event that happens inside the hospital. For others, it can be a conversation, a breakup, a book, or maybe a line in a book, a scene in a movie, one sentence in a podcast interview. If you actually listen to people talk about how they changed, nobody ever mentions the 21-day checkbox method. They usually tell a story. They tell you about a moment when something clicked. After the click, they are a different person. The old behavior doesn't fit anymore. In this story, there is usually no willpower battle because there's nothing left to fight. And I really encourage you to think about your favorite podcast interview that you've listened in the last few months, where people talked about something that they have changed in their life. What was it? Like, why? I bet you'll find a story, a click, a moment where something shifted in their brain, and then the new behavior was a result of this mental change. Once I realized this, my first question was, can I self-engineer the click? If I want to change a behavior, can I make the click happen? So I'm in charge of when the click happens and how, or do I have to just wait for the perfect moment? And to be honest, I'm still figuring out how to self-engineer this click. I have a few ideas. I'm testing them out. Some of them are successful, some of them are not so. But here's what I think is going on. My working theory. In my opinion, the click is deeply connected to your value system. And we all have different value systems. When we try to build a habit using someone else's method, we are often borrowing the lenses of someone whose values don't match ours. Oftentimes we hear about their fitness routine, their diet, their morning rituals. We try to borrow the same mechanics, the same how-to, but it doesn't stick because the meaning doesn't match. The meaning that they communicated in that podcast interview, it didn't click. Whatever mechanics they transferred, it never sticks. That's why a third generation academic can't lose weight watching a hot chick fitness influencer's TikTok videos. Because one person was raised on being praised for being smart and independent. She was judged on the quality of her ideas, not her looks. But the other person who she's watching, she was raised on being praised for being beautiful, and her main objective was to be liked by men. And that's why she became like this beautiful fitness influencer. So the third generation academic is watching these TikTok videos and she's trying really hard, but nothing sticks because the values are from the polar opposite spectrums. They might both speak English, they can both live in the same town, but they speak different value language. The click is highly unlikely to happen in this situation. But if you can find a person with a similar value system who already does the thing you want to do consistently, or they've stopped the thing that you want to stop, and you ask them the right questions, maybe go on a hike, and it needs to be a prolonged period of time where you can talk to them one-on-one, and you ask the right question, something different will happen. You don't just learn what they do, you start to see the behavior the way they see it. You start to see how this behavior applies to their value system. You ask, why do you actually go on that boring walk every day? What's in it for you? And if their answer lands inside your value system, the boring walk doesn't look boring anymore. It looks obvious. You're like, I get it. It clicks. And side note, there is a book I think did more for public health than almost anything published in the last 50 years. And it gets nowhere near the credit it deserves. The book is called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking by Alan Carr. On this podcast and on my blog, I'm trying to talk about practical things that work in real life. I don't find them through reading academic articles or reading smart books or learning about theory. I talk about the things that I know work, that I saw work in real life. I've tried them and they work for me. And then I talk about them. That's how I found Agile in the first place. I found it being incredibly practical and effective in startups. And then I started applying it in my own life for my own personal projects. And then I started talking about it on this podcast. And same with this book. I personally know 4 people who quit smoking because of this book. And I don't know a lot of people who smoke to begin with. So this is a very high success rate. I've read it myself, and I think it's a masterclass in the click method. It doesn't lean on willpower. It doesn't promote self-discipline and any of that. Obviously not a 21-day checklist. It doesn't even spend much time on health and the negative benefits of smoking, because everyone already knows smoking is bad for you, and nobody quits because of that fact alone until it's too late. What it does instead is examine the act of smoking from every possible angle, from every excuse a smoker has ever given for why they're smoking. Stress, relaxation, identity, social bonding, boredom. One by one, the author dismantles every excuse. Each chapter contains a small click. So you're reading this, and if you're a smoker, you're like, I'd never thought about it like that. And by the end, you don't need to white-knuckle quitting. The whole thing just stops making sense. You don't have a single reason to continue smoking because they've all been debunked by small mental clicks throughout the book. You smoke your last cigarette and you're done. That book is a different category of self-help. It isn't built on hustle and discipline. It's built on rearranging how you see the act of smoking. I want to do some promotion for this book because, again, I think it's like the most underappreciated book of the 20th century. It's the most practical book and the most effective. I have yet to find a book in the self-help or self-improvement genre that would be as effective as this book for quitting smoking. And the same dynamic shows up everywhere. Think about studying a tough subject in school. Math, physics, whatever it was for you. You can grind through problem sets, memorize formulas, push through with discipline, and still feel completely lost. But then there is that magical moment when the underlying logic clicks. After that, you don't have to memorize it. It's just your brain understands it. It clicks. Before the click, no amount of repetition was going to save you. But after the click, you don't even have to think about it. You just understand the logic of how things work. Behavior change works the same way, I think. Again, my work in theory and what I've been seeing in practice in real life. Without the click, all the discipline in the world is wasted effort. With it, the daily action stops feeling like a fight. Once the click happens, the desired behavior becomes the most obvious choice. Again, at this point in time, I don't have all the answers on how to engineer the click on demand. I'm still working on it. When it's ready, I'll let you know. But if you're trying to start something or stop something, I beg you, don't reach for the traditional habit building tools. They look logical, they might even be philosophically solid and scientifically defensible. The problem is they don't work in practice. Have you met the person who got results from them? I haven't. And from what I hear from my readers, they haven't met those people either. Instead, look in the direction of things that actually do work. Listen to interviews. Read the kind of books that takes your behavior apart and shows you a different angle on it, preferably from the values that you have. Find people whose values resemble yours and ask them how they actually think about the thing you're trying to change. Maybe look at your coworkers, look at people living in your neighborhood, or people in your friend group, people who are like you, who have achieved the things that you want to achieve. And I bet they have an insight, a different way of looking at things that you haven't heard in popular books or popular TV shows or whatever. The closer the person is to your value system, the more likely they see it in a way that will be helpful for you to see this behavior from. Something has to click. Once it does, consistency stops being a willpower problem and starts being, again, the most logical thing. And I think that's the only honest version of habit change I've seen work. And that's why I think sprint retrospective and regular reflection is so important for improving our lives. It's more important than setting goals, because through retrospective and reflection, we get closer to our value system. We get to reveal what we value, what's important to us. And once we have crystal clarity on our value system, then whatever behavior change we're trying to achieve, then we can kind of like go shopping and we say, okay, how do I look at this behavior from this value set? How does it affect this value? How does it affect that value? And then you go and find people who have similar value sets and you interview them. You ask the right questions, and then they will be able to give you the key that will be able to unlock the click. So yeah, if you've been doing sprint planning, daily stand-ups, but you've been neglecting sprint retrospectives, this is another reminder for why it's important. Without honest conversations with yourself about like why some things work and some things don't, you will not be able to successfully move forward, because you'll be repeating the same mistakes, trying to adapt behaviors for the values you don't have, and nothing will ever change. So yeah, if you want to join our next sprint, you can always go to my website, monthlymethod.com/focusroom, and sign up for the waitlist, and you'll be notified when we open up the enrollment for the next sprint. We start a new sprint every single month. That's why it's called the monthly method. And we go through all the tools: sprint planning, daily stand-ups, sprint retrospectives, all of that. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.